The world believed Princess Diana's fortune would vanish into the royal vault after her death, but they were wrong. When her will was unsealed in 1997, what was discovered inside shocked everyone who thought they knew what the palace had planned. Many saw Diana as the people's princess, the fairy tale bride, the beloved royal icon. Yet everything assumed about her final wishes was about to be completely overturned. Who did she truly leave her estate to? And why had she concealed a mysterious shadow trust that even the palace never knew existed? The explosive truth the royal family had long hoped to keep buried was finally coming to light. A secret so powerful and so shocking that it would forever change the way the world understood Princess Diana. Diana Frances Spencer was never born into invisibility, but she was certainly never groomed to become an international celebrity. She grew up at Althorpe surrounded by aristocratic traditions, though her childhood was deeply shaped by her parents' painful divorce. She was only 20 years old, quietly working as a kindergarten aide, when she first met Charles III. Soft-spoken and almost shockingly ordinary, nothing about her suggested what was coming. Then the 29th of July, 1981 arrived, and the world changed. The wedding at St. Paul's Cathedral felt less like a ceremony and more like the crowning of a new era. Around 750 million people watched Diana glide down the aisle in ivory silk and antique lace, her 25-foot train sweeping behind her like a comet's tail. What the world witnessed that day was not merely a royal union, but a symbol of hope, warmth, and possibility at a time when the monarchy had felt cold and unreachable. But fairy tales, when they come true, can carry a dangerous weight. Behind the closed doors of royal life, loneliness crept in almost immediately. Charles had never truly let go of his feelings for Camilla Parker Bowles, and Diana could sense her presence long before the world caught on. That insecurity quietly hollowed her out, eventually developing into bulimia, a private battle she would later speak about openly as her way of reclaiming control in a life where she felt utterly powerless. The palace demanded composure while Diana overflowed with emotion. Through the 1980s, the illusion held, but only barely. When the Camille Gate tape surfaced in 1992, exposing private phone calls between Charles and Camilla, the shame rippled across the entire world, and the couple's formal separation was announced that same year. What Diana did next had never been done before. In 1995, she sat before Martin Bashir on Panorama, calm, hurt, and clearly indignant, and she spoke the truth out loud. It was far more than a confession. It was a declaration of freedom. The shy young woman who had once been handed a script by the palace had transformed into someone who understood the power of the media better than the institution that had tried to control her. She danced with John Travolta at the White House, formed a genuine friendship with Elton John, and shook hands with AIDS patients without gloves at a time when fear and ignorance kept most people at a distance. She walked through active minefields in Angola wearing jeans and a sweater, redefining entirely what royal service could look like. Where the palace prized stoicism, Diana weaponized her vulnerability, and by the early 1990s, the fairy tale had not just ended but flipped completely upside down. She was no longer the monarchy's jewel. She had become its most powerful moral conscience. Her humanitarian work was not simply charity. It was protest carried out with compassion. When she visited the AIDS unit at Middlesex Hospital in 1987, she shook hands with patients without hesitation, smiled, listened, and treated them with full human dignity at a time when many feared even casual contact. She said clearly that HIV gave her not a moment's pause, and that single act sent a message to the world that illness was never something to be ashamed of and that every person deserved care and respect. Governments took notice. Public attitudes began to shift, and lives were quietly saved in ways that could never fully be counted. Her work on landmines proved equally transformative. In January 1997, she walked carefully through fields in Angola where thousands had been killed or maimed by hidden mines, carrying no helmet, no guards, only her courage. The photograph shook the world, embarrassed governments into action, and contributed directly to the signing of the Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel mines just months later. By 2023, millions of those mines have been destroyed, and Diana's bravery had been a driving force behind that change. She visited leprosy patients, befriended orphans, and sat with the destitute and overlooked. The royal family reportedly disliked it, with Charles said to have dismissed her efforts as attention-seeking. Diana paid no attention to that criticism because she knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew it was saving lives. Her charitable work raised millions, changed laws, reshaped policies, and gave hope to people the world had forgotten. Every hospital visit, every minefield walk, every outstretched hand was an act of quiet defiance against the palace that had trapped, humiliated, and tried to silence her. Tradition demanded obedience. Diana chose understanding. The institution wanted stillness. Diana chose action. She had discovered that kindness, wielded with intention, could be every bit as powerful as any royal decree. Her divorce was finalized in 1996, freeing her from an unbearable marriage, though the battles were far from over. Custody fights and relentless media scrutiny pressed down on her daily. Yet Diana remained focused and purposeful. She had begun planning something that would outlast her, a carefully constructed one designed to ensure that her voice, her values, and her compassion would continue to shape the world long after she was gone. This was not done quietly or passively. It came as a natural conclusion of every act of courage that had defined her life, every AIDS patient visited, every landmine field walked, every forgotten child embraced. Her final act would guarantee that her strength, her defiance, and her kindness could never be erased. It was July 1996 in Kensington Palace. The summer air carried the scent of roses as Diana sat alone at her mahogany desk, a lamp casting long shadows across the walls, photographs of William and Harry watching over her with innocent eyes. She was 35 years old, her marriage finished, her crown stripped away, her life picked apart by millions of watching eyes. But that night she picked up her pen and took back everything. She could have spent or dispersed the £17 million she had received from the divorce settlement, book deals, and jewelry sales without a second thought. Instead, she built something deliberate, something that would shock the palace, unsettle the press, and prove that no one had ever truly been in charge of her but herself. Her intentions were clear and unflinching. 75% of her estate was directed toward the causes that defined her life: support for AIDS sufferers, landmine victims, and children without families. This was not a quiet donation, but a thunderous statement of values. The remaining 25% was placed into carefully structured trusts for William and Harry, every detail managed and protected, designed to shield them from the very world that had done so much damage to their mother. And then came the twist that left everyone speechless. Paul Burrell, her butler 10 years, was named executor. The man who had polished her shoes, guarded her secrets, and been her silent anchor through her darkest years was now the keeper of her entire legacy. Not a palace lawyer, not a royal advisor, just Burrell, the one person who had truly known her heart. That night Diana wept quietly as she signed each page, turned to Burrell and telling him that this was her last chance to be free. Those words were not performance. They were truth. Every stroke of her pen was an act of resistance, proof that betrayal, isolation, and years of unrelenting scrutiny had failed to break her. Palace lawyers circled and whispered about instability and amendments, pressuring her to revise the document to better suit the institution's interests. Her fingers never trembled, and neither did her resolve. This was her moment, and she would not surrender it. The will left nothing to chance. Every piece of jewelry, every painting, every property, and every pound was accounted for. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, her AIDS campaigns, her landmine work, and her children's causes were all secured and would continue thriving in her absence. Her sons' trusts were built to protect and provide without pulling them into the toxic machinery of royal politics. She had written something that was simultaneously practical and profoundly powerful. Yet the deepest shock was still waiting to be revealed. Most assumed the estate would flow simply to her sons and her charities, but one person ultimately held the keys to everything. One person who could shape the destiny of her stories, her treasures, and her memory. One person entrusted to carry Diana's voice, her defiance, and her power forward into the future. On the surface, Diana's will appear straightforward. £17 million divided carefully, the greater portion flowing charity and the rest secured for William and Harry. But buried within those clean lines was something far more significant. Paul Burrell was not simply her butler or her friend. He was the sole guardian of her deepest secrets, the hidden letters, the late-night kitchen conversations, the full unfiltered truth of who she really was. He had stood beside her through bulimia and grief, through betrayal and isolation, and now he would stand beside her legacy. Diana had made certain of that. Even in death, she refused to let anyone else speak for her.